Welcome to SIIMcast, a podcast brought to you by the Society for Imaging Informatics and Medicine.
Well, hello, SIIMcast listeners. I've got the pleasure of sitting with my two co-hosts right now, Prasanth and Coulter, and this is our traditional annual year-end wrap-up episode. In this episode, we don't really have any fixed agenda or any guests to interview. We're just chatting among ourselves. Lots of dad jokes. That's guaranteed when Prasanth and I are present. Coulter is here to keep us sane. And then, we're going to talk about what's exciting at the next annual SIIM conference, reflecting on the past season of SIIMcast. And on that front, I'm actually going to say that although in this last season of SIIMcast, we had agreed to slow down the pace a little bit, so we went from releasing every 3 weeks to every 4 weeks, just because there was a lot going on for each of us in our lives. I'm actually very, very proud of this past season because I'm looking at the episodes we released, and I know there were ones that we've been wanting to do for a very, very long time. I kid you not when I say some of these episodes took years of planning, and shall I say a little bit of stalking of our
little bit
guests, just a little bit, right?
I think a little bit that's appropriate. A little bit of stalking, yeah.
Yeah. Prasanth, you want to point out exactly which episode here there was stalking involved?
So I believe you're talking about the Steve Horry episode. I've been trying to get a hold of Steve and literal years of coordinating because he was busy working as an attending. And we'd try and this and that, and then he retired, and he was busy with his retirement stuff, his hobbies, grandchildren, etc. And finally, we were able to get him at the last meeting in Portland last year, and it was absolutely worth the wait. It was fantastic to hear. I mean, first off, Steve is a wealth, a fountain of knowledge, and he's probably forgotten more about informatics than I will ever know. When you see Steve at the meeting, when he goes up to the microphone to ask a question, everyone kind of perks up because they know it's going to be an interesting question. It's going to be something thoughtful, and that it's going to move the ball forward. And he's going to have some insight in there that everyone's going to gain from. So just listening to the stories of how they came up with DICOM and the different things, and some of the karaoke nights that they had in Japan and all sorts. You're just like, how the heck did any of this get all done? It was incredible. Definitely one of the episodes that I am happy we finally were able to get in the bag.
Yeah, I was privileged enough to train at Penn with Steve, and always really enjoyed his lectures when he would come in. He didn't talk too much about imaging informatics, but that's just a testament to him being a gifted informaticist, but as well as a gifted clinician. So yeah, it's crazy. Some people get all the luck, I guess,
Well, I think one of the things that I've kind of seen throughout all of the My Informatics Journey series, right? You're right. Some people get a lot of luck, but also it's like the connections, and maybe that's part of the luck, but it's also, there's something else to it. Like Dave R. Averin was talking about oh yeah, when I was at MIT, blah, blah, blah. And I'd go see Professor Bose. I'm like, wait, as in on the boat, Bose, yes, that was one of his professors. And then, talking about Joe and how he was like, oh yeah, you should do this. And then, so-and-so, you should do that. And and how he moved everybody around to set the board up. It was great. And I don't know if he had an overarching view of anything. This is Joe Gitlin, because you hear about these stories from Steve and Dave and all these other guys and ladies and it's incredible how, he's like, oh yeah, you have an interest in this, talk to these guys. And then suddenly all the people kind of fell into place. And I don't know if that's pure luck or part of his skill, or maybe he did have, I don't know. And it's just incredible to just think, wow, we would not be here today if these people weren't in the right places at the right time, i.e. luck, but also knowing what these their skill sets that would be useful for these certain things. Because, as smart as some of them are, like Chuck Kahn, for instance, he's big into ontologies and stuff like that, it's like Ken Wang. or lexicons and stuff. Like, so that's what they work on a lot of. But if they had gotten moved to the, if some of these people got moved to the wrong spot, we may not have gotten to where we are now. And it's just incredible to look through this history, these arcs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know,
absolutely.
Mohannad, have you seen that too?
Absolutely. And I was going to say one thing with both of these guests, both very distinguished, and the other one is Dr. Avery, as you mentioned. Both have a very colored history in both radiology, I would say, and in imaging informatics. And what is amazing is both of them have been retired for a little while now, but they're still involved in the community. They still come out to the meetings. They're having a lot of fun doing it. But when they sit down and they talk about their experiences and things that they've done in their career, what struck me the most is, number one, how extremely generous they are with their time. Just Dr. Avery, once he sat down with us, we were sitting there for a whole 2 hours. Same thing with Dr. Avery. But the other thing is how fresh everything is in their minds. I've actually had a friend who listened to the podcast with Dr. Avery and reach out to me saying, like, he's got to be well into his 80s and he's got a memory so bright. It's just fresh. Like, he's telling these things like they happened yesterday. It's amazing. I guess, these guys that are pioneers for a really good reason. So.
Yeah, I tell people my brain these last several years was more like a sieve. Like, I can't remember half the crap I used to. I have no idea how these guys have managed to remember all this stuff to the level of detail. Like, hats off to them. But the other thing is, it might also be partly the generational differences, because as some of my attendings used to say, it's like, the smartest person in the room was the person who knew the most facts. Now the smartest person in the room is who can find the information the quickest, because, we have the sum total knowledge of the world in the palm of our hands. Now it's not, we had to, yes, we have to memorize a bunch of stuff to some degree, but we also can rely on our peripheral brains. So it may be like, how many of us remember phone numbers nowadays? Like, we're not exercising that part of our brains like these guys did to memorize as much. So it might be partly that kind of cultural change. I don't know.
So, Coulter, I wanted to ask you a question. Your first season in SIIMcast, any reflections, any thoughts? Good and bad.
Yeah. I don't know if there's really any bad ones. It's been great so far. I've only been on, I think, just one episode so far with the ladies from the hackathon, who were obviously very gifted, and that was a great conversation. I'm excited to continue on into the future, obviously, and keep talking to these great guests that we are lucky enough to get to talk to, and learn a lot. Hopefully, myself. This is beneficial, hopefully, for the listeners, but also selfishly for me. So.
I definitely echo the selfish part, because that's one of the reasons why I joined. So this is my story. I actually used to walk up to Prasanth and Arjun every SIIM meeting. But I love what you guys are doing. This is amazing. I think 3 years after, I kept doing that over and over. Like, hey, why don't you just join us? It's easier that way. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I could be right there when the episode is being made. I get that free knowledge. So yeah, same boat here for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when we were starting this out, Arjun would say, like, man, like, I don't want to sound stupid. And I'm like, Arjun, it doesn't matter. Like, it's our job to sound stupid and ask questions, because if we think of a question, someone else out there is thinking of this too. And we have to span somebody who's just starting out to somebody who's been in the society for, however many years, that knows a fair amount of stuff. So yeah, ask whatever question, no matter how silly it seems. Somebody out there who's listening is probably wondering the same thing. And it's okay. As we are journalists to some degree. So ask the questions. And if people think we sound stupid, okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah, it's fine. I think something that I've definitely come to learn and appreciate over my very short time in informatics is it takes all kinds, it takes all types. And, some people are experts in X and completely oblivious in Y, and some people are experts in Y and oblivious in X, and people like Steve Horry have X and Y.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, people like me have neither X or Y.
Yeah, you and me both. Yeah.
Like, I learned so much from Jason about, like, standards. I knew some stuff about it, but like his knowledge, I'm just like, wow. And then he's asking these questions like, yeah, I never thought about that. That's interesting. And that got me more interested in learning about some of these things too. And the same with Mohannad, like so some of the stuff, coming from more of the programming side, I learned some programming in undergrad as an engineer, but you wouldn't want me programming much more than like a TRS-80 at this, like way basic kind of stuff. But just to hear the thought processes and the other bits and pieces, it opens your eyes and mind to different ideas and things like that. It's great. Yeah, absolutely. It is selfishly, it is pretty awesome to do this.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about SIIM and just like the informatics culture in general is, I think I was talking about this on the last episode we did, but just the fact that there are, programmers and statisticians and doctors and all kinds of healthcare professionals and so on and so forth. And I think, going through med school and, working with the folks that I worked with, there can be like this tendency to be like, at least in healthcare culture, of like, oh, I'm gonna, try and come up with this idea and research it myself, and like I need to be an expert in this field to do the research. And I think in informatics it's kind of the opposite, where at least for me as a radiologist, I should not expect myself to be an expert in coding or programming or a lot of this stuff, and lean on my colleagues like Mohannad and the computer scientists who can help me take a clinical idea into the informatics space.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for what it's worth, I mean, that's also the draw for someone like me. It's, the opposite end of the game, where like a lot of us could have technical skills, but we don't really know what a radiologist world is like. I used to be very heavily involved in the SIIM hackathon for many years, and that was one of the common themes that we talk about, is you need a mix of both, because you have clinicians or technologists come in with their, they've got a bag full of problems they would love to solve. And then you have on the other end of the spectrum, our developers and coders who have the skills to solve a lot of these problems, but they don't actually have problems to solve. So when you match the two, you can now start to have a catalyst and chain reaction, hopefully.
Yeah, one of the things that Paul Nagy always talked about when I was in fellowship was that the informaticists are like the communications bridge, because we understand both specifically coming from the physician side, we understand the medical side of things, and then we learn about the technical side of things enough so that we can help bring those two things together, the problems and the problem solvers, and we can communicate back and forth and help relay so people understand why it's important, what we're trying to actually get at, and what problems or difficulties the technical side might be having, and explaining like, okay, well, this is how this process works, this is why these things and this is why it's taking longer than expected. Like sometimes vendors may say like, oh yeah, this will take like 2 days to implement, and yes, installing programs and things like that can take 2 days, something, large programs, etc., setting up, blah, blah, blah. But the lead up to that, with all of the testing to make sure that it is not going to break the rest of the enterprise software, that it's going to, the interoperability, the going through the security reviews. And these are all, I'm not saying that these aren't important. They're very important things, but it's not a 2-day. Yes, that little slice. Yeah, it might be 2 days. But realistically, you're talking a couple months process to get through everything. And a lot of, the clinicians, because they're not in that sphere, they don't understand that whole thing. And being able to explain to them, this is why this, yes, you're very excited about having this new widget, and they said it would be like 2 days. Yes, you're absolutely right. When we get to that point, 2 days will be done. But there's a huge lead up to that 2 days. It's not a simple thing. And then nowadays, especially with larger institutions, it's like there's a queue of programs that are going to be implemented. So you have to get, not only you're finished all of your lead up, now you have to sit and wait in queue while other, like the latest Epic or Cerner update or blah, 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 whatever other updates and other programs are in the queue. So it's, understanding a lot of these things, or even the IT process of like ticketing. Like, why can't I just call someone and tell them what's wrong? Why do you guys need to do this ticket thing? Well, because then we can track the tickets and then we can understand what the patterns are and see like, oh, well, maybe we do need to change out this server or that hardware because it keeps crashing. And because there are, a dozen different PACS administrators, no single one person knows that this is being a problem until we aggregate the data. Just various things like that. It puts us in a very interesting place, and it's very helpful in many ways.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to talk about one other thing as far as episodes we've been thinking about for years or wanting to do for years. So there is a couple I wanted to cover here. Of course, one that just came out as we're recording here today. Prasanth, the one on diagnostic monitors. I'll let you cover that one, and I'll cover mine, but you go ahead first.
Oh, yeah. So obviously monitors, we're looking at them all the time, literally. In trying to find people to help talk about them and learn deeper about it, it's tough. So we were able to get Herman, and I can't remember the other gentleman's name that we spoke with. Jeff, yes. Herman and Jeff. And it was fantastic to actually be able to get some questions answered about it and to find out that my TV is like a 8 megapixel. I'm like, oh my God, if I do the calculations out, my TV is like an 8 megapixel monitor. But we don't think of it that way, right? Just different things like, yeah, it was fantastic to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of how monitors work, why certain like calibrations and different things like that, and why it's important. And yeah. So what was your episode that you're thinking?
That one, of course, was an important one for me because I knew it's something you've had on your mind for years, and we've been trying to find the right guest for it. Personally, for me, again, it's one of my favorites, but one that I've wanted to do for a very long time was our interview with Sebastian Jordonia, who is the author of OrthInc. Those of you who know me know that I'm a massive open source geek, and OrthInc is one of the products I use the most, probably on almost daily basis. So, of course, I'm a huge fan of Sebastian, his work, his philosophy, because it's not just an open source project, it's a whole ecosystem, and the vision definitely carries through. So yeah, for me, he and I have been talking on off for a few years and, finally found the time to actually do this. Now, that's actually a really nice segue into something else we could talk about. Sebastian is actually coming to the next SIIM annual meeting. So I'm also very, very excited because I'll get to meet him finally face to face after all these years and, discussions and things like that.
That's awesome.
Indeed, yeah. So for me, that's one of the top things I'm looking forward to at the annual meeting. But what about you guys? What are you looking forward to?
Sounds good. Well, I was gonna say it's my first meeting, so I'm not even sure. I'm looking forward to all of it. I don't even know what to look forward to at this point. I'm looking forward to obviously getting up early in the morning and going to the first time attendees mixer. Yeah, gotta have my coffee that morning, I suppose. But the just all the other things, trying to, I guess, find the sessions that talk about. I'm particularly interested in informatics as it applies to radiologist workflow. So I know there's a lot of sessions that are going to be over that, trying to hit those, and then trying to go to and see what the hackathon's all about. I'm, listening to a couple of the episodes and hearing from those folks has really piqued my interest. Obviously, trying to see what that's all about, and I've heard great things, so I'm excited to watch.
Yeah, I'm happy to see that they're still trying to branch out from not just AI stuff, which is good. I mean, yes, obviously it's important, but kind of like cloud computing about a decade and change ago, everything was about that. And there are other aspects to what we do that are also important, and we need to talk about them because things are still progressing on those too. So there's one session that kind of caught my eye when I was looking through this the other day. It was about ground truth, labeling and benchmarks, right? Like those definitions change things massively. Like, just thinking about like the SIIM initiative, right? This was something that they started a few years ago to help kind of get a common set of labels for like, when does the exam start? Is it when the patient enters the room, when they're on the table, when you hit scan? When does it end? When the scan is done, when the patient gets off? Like these different, because that way we can standardize our data and things like that. So, having some of these benchmarks and ground truth kind of things like that, I'm curious to see what those kind of things are, how they progressed, and where we are with these important, definitions. Essentially, I mean, you wouldn't. Sometimes you don't think like how important a dictionary is until it's like, no, it actually is way more important.
Prasanth, you made me smile, as you and I are definitely getting old, but we're failing to realize it. You
Oh,
said
no, I know
SIIM
I'm
was
old.
a few years ago. That was
I know.
12 years ago.
Yeah. Well, like I said, like it's a sieve. Like, and trust me, I know I'm old.
Me too. Coulter, it's crazy that it is your first SIIM. I actually did not realize that. And the funny coincidence is, before we hopped on this call today, I was thinking to myself, like, should we talk about any first time attendee tips? I was like, no, there can't be a first time attendee listening to this. They found the SIIMcast, but one of our own is first time. So here are my tips. You started with the right one, saying that you're going to go attend the first time attendee meetup. That was actually my own mistake the first time I went to SIIM. I remember being, too proud to go to the first time attendee meetup. Like, I'm not going to go there and make a fool of myself. Bad idea. Definitely go to the first time attendee meetup. It is amazing, exceptionally friendly people, and you're going to make new friends right away. And that is the general theme of my advice. When you go to SIIM, make friends, a lot of friends. There's a thing we usually say about SIIM, that quote unquote, the real education happens in the hallways. So it's not to make less of any of the sessions. The sessions are really good for sure. But the real education is in the interaction and making those connections, networking with people. So my recommendation to you is, not everyone is necessarily comfortable with just going up and talking to strangers, but like that 1 week, stretch that muscle as much as you can. And there are multiple ways and occasions to meet people. First time attendee meetup is a great one. The second one is, whenever you're attending sessions, say, for example, you attended a talk on some topic and the talk was really good, go out of your way to go after the talk to the speaker and say, hey, I was at your talk and it was really good. The next thing you know, you're conversing with your friends. Hackathon is a great avenue. And there are, of course, networking events. So the reception, silent auction, these are definitely good opportunities to get in and, mingle with people. So that's my top recommendation. And then the other thing to keep in mind when you're planning your SIIM schedule is take a moment to figure out the different session types, because that will help orient you based on your interests. For example, there's regular talks that will have a topic, maybe multiple presenters, but around the general theme. You also have the scientific abstract presentations. So like, if you're someone who's interested in academia and cutting edge research and whatnot, that's usually interesting. For me personally, I don't usually go to those sessions because honestly, they're way above my head. So I go to stuff my level. You have things like learning labs. So if you're interested in, doing any hands-on kind of learning, guided, whatnot, these are really good sessions. Other sessions type I can't think of, but maybe Prasanth, you add your bit here too.
I was actually going to echo, going and talking to people just more on the vendor side of things, because I know sometimes people get a little shy to go and talk to the vendors, or they're like, oh, well, they're going to try to sell me on this or da-da-da. And yes, they're there to, make contacts in the industry and maybe make sales, whatnot, but they are a wealth of knowledge and information too. And many vendors do give talks as well. So, Paul Lipton from AGFA is somebody that I know from the vendor sphere. Don Dennison used to work at AGFA as well. So I've gotten to know them over the years and learned a ton of different things from them, which is great. And then I've gotten to meet some other vendors throughout my time there. So definitely, just go up and you can even say like, what are you guys working on these days? What's the latest and greatest of your widgets or whatnot? And there are a lot of smaller companies too that are hungry to, get the word out about their products. And you can find some really interesting, unique products out there that you're like, I had no idea that someone was working on this. I didn't realize this was even a problem. Okay. Like, how are you solving it? And that's one, circling into the hackathon. That is one of the reasons I like going to the hackathon, because like, I didn't know this was a problem. This is an interest, or like, how are you solving this problem? Like things like that, where it's like, okay, that's kind of neat. What did you do? How are you going to do this? All right, it's kind of fun. Let's think about this some more. And then don't be afraid to go to sessions where you know nothing about it, or that you feel like, like Mohannad saying, is like, it's over my head. Like, I sometimes go to sessions where I know nothing about it. I know it's going to be, but I'm going to pick up something. I'll learn something new. The learning labs are great as well. I've been to a few of those over time, and it is a great way to pick up actual hands-on skills. If you're interested in like things like the fun run, I'm not sure how those two words go together, especially super early in the morning, but some, people like doing that. And then they have the networking events in the evenings. The hallway discussions, I've actually skipped lectures because I'm like, ooh, that's a way more interesting question. I'm going to go, I'm going to hear this discussion and continue talking to find out more from everybody else. Yeah. Another fun thing is when we're in DC, it's usually around the same time as the National Spelling Bee. So what people will do is they'll pop their head into the spelling bee and kind of see what's going on there. And people have watched like the championship rounds and things like that. So it's there are a lot of other interesting things going around in the town, usually when our meeting is there. It's not just us. So that's another thing you can do is, make friends from other things. I will also say trying to go to some of the ologies that are non-radiology talks, like about like ophtho or ophthalmology, dermatology. I had no idea the difficulties that these specialties had in doing what we do, like things like white balance for image acquisition. I'm like, white balance? Well, oh yeah, that's going to be a thing. Like for us, it's all grayscale off of the computer. We're not taking visual light imagery. So like white balance, and then when you think about that, like, patients upload pictures into the electronic medical record, like they're probably not doing any white balancing. So now what do you do? How do you get apple to apple comparison? I'm just like, oh my Lord, this is way more complex. I had no idea. So those kind of things help. And like we've done podcast episodes with the pathologists. We've done some crossovers. I'm still pushing for the people who read pathology remotely, kind of like we have Telerad. They could be telepaths, but I don't know if that's ever going to go through. We'll see. There's your dad joke.
I'm surprised. We've been recording for a while, and this is the first one that came out. Yeah, you and I must be pretty slow today.
Well, there's just so many other interesting things to discuss.
Yeah. You touched on some really interesting points that I actually want to expand a little bit on. So Coulter and anyone who's attending SIIM for the first time, the point Prasanth pointed out about the vendor is actually very true for a couple of reasons. So number one, look for these, what they call them informatics tech talks. They are vendor sponsored, but they're actually usually informative. It's not just a sales pitch. They're usually offering you some insights. The other thing you'll notice is if you contrast something like the vendor hall, exhibit hall at SIIM versus something like RSNA. RSNA is all about flashiness and, they're showcasing perhaps prototypes that are totally out there. The vibe at SIIM is going to be very different. Usually they're showing their products. So usually they have some of their technical people, product managers, maybe even architects or software engineers there. So the type of conversations you'll have are going to be a lot more in-depth. People are generally also like, not just the vendors, but even the attendees at SIIM are going to be a lot more relaxed. So when you run into people, you chat with them, they're not in a hurry to get to their next thing or so on and so forth. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. You mentioned the hackathon. I didn't want to plug the hackathon too much. Again, it's an important part of my history. But since you're twisting my hand into it, I'll tell you what to do. So obviously, you could definitely participate in the hackathon itself if you're driven. It might be a little too much for your first time at SIIM. I'll let you make that decision. But a few things to keep in mind is the hackathon is actually hybrid. So the hackathon kicks off usually about a week and a half to 2 weeks before the annual conference. And it's usually initially virtual. And then there's a part of the hackathon that's on site. So if you're interested, you could definitely join the virtual part. There's a Slack space usually, maybe some Zoom calls and stuff like that. And in your case, there's some matchmaking that happens at the hackathon that you can basically just advertise, hey, I'm a radiologist who's interested in informatics. And by advertising this, someone may actually pair you up with a team, perhaps of developers who are looking for someone with clinical expertise. So that's one way to get involved. Nice and fun way.
Statistically, it will be paired up with one of Terry's teams just because she brings so many people, which is awesome. I'm not trying to throw shade. It's really cool that she brings so many of these college kids to the hackathon, and like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 teams of like 4 each, something like that. I'm like, she's bringing like 16 to 20 kids. It's incredible she's able to do this.
Amazing, for sure. It's actually a whole ecosystem. So they do some fundraising, and depending on how much they raise, that's basically how many teams and how many kids she ends up bringing, and so on and so forth. Yeah, honestly, we could probably do a whole episode just on that. But the hackathon, at the very least, is something you definitely want to stop by and check out. They have a specific area carved out in the exhibit hall. And then my personal favorite is the hackathon showcase. So on the last day of the show, everyone that did a project will show off their projects. And they're going to be in various states of finished. Some of them are going to look somewhat polished. Some of them are going to be very raw. But one way or another, it's really cool to see these ideas that people have thought about and, made some effort towards. So it's a lot of fun in that sense.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. And, I think the hackathon, like you said, is probably maybe a little over my head for the first time to participate, but very excited to see what all of the folks come up with. And like Prasanth said, trying to maybe take some of those ideas back to Kansas. But, also something I forgot to plug, if I might, I'm on the members in training committee for SIIM, even though I'm no longer a member in training. It's a 2-year thing. So I'm coming to the end of my second year here. But one thing we're piloting this year is a case of the day. And so there should be, it's like a little thing. Every day there'll be a case that kind of illustrates, informatics concepts for those who might not be as familiar, some good multiple choice questions, and kind of just some really nice highlights of the field and kind of how it's basically these case scenarios that have little presentations associated with them, and kind of walks you through how to think about these informatics problems as either a clinician or an informaticist or a programmer or what have you. I think those are going to be hopefully well received. I know I just got done reading through the cases, scoring them, and there were a lot of good ones. Really, really tough to narrow it down, but very excited to see those.
We might need case of the day teams to solve some of these problems then, huh?
Honestly. Yeah. Maybe the hackathon can take some pointers.
Absolutely. Feel free to touch base with the organizers of the hackathon. I'm sure they'll appreciate any potential collaboration overlap. You did remind me of something that's actually very important to point out to everyone, whether you're new or not. Members of training will usually host some form of social. So some years it's been an ice cream. Last year, I think it was a breakfast. And it's funny because most people assume that these things are only open to members in training. It's actually not. In fact, none members in training are encouraged to show up to these events because the idea is to introduce the members in training to some of the more senior members. So yeah, that's going to be on my list of events to crash. Do you know what you guys are doing this year, Coulter?
I'm not sure what we're doing this year. I know that at one of our recent meetings, they talked about the ice cream social and how well received that was. Maybe they'll bring it back. We'll see. But
Yes, please.
yeah, I assume our next meeting will be talking a lot about those things. I know that last year I think we also did a thing where for, either junior members or members in training or first time attendees, such as myself, we kind of tried to do our best to kind of not narrow down the talks that you should go to, but kind of go through the program and be like, okay, maybe this is your first time or you're not as in the field. And so these might be the talks that would be beneficial to you to get a taste and, dip your foot in the water. So I think we might be doing that again this year for the folks who want to take a look at that.
Yeah, I remember when they came up with that concept. It's almost like a curated playlist or like session planning. I think it's a really cool idea for sure. It's definitely a conference where if you're uninitiated and perhaps a little bit on the shy, timid side, it can get a little overwhelming. So yeah, anything people could do to try and guide others goes a long way for sure.
Yeah, staying organized helps a bit, like having a little bit of a plan, like which ones you want to hit up and things. Otherwise, it's just a free for all and you can get lost pretty quickly.
So I just found it. I Googled it while we were talking. Members in Training is hosting a breakfast, and it is Thursday, June 11th from 7 to 8 a.m. And location just shows room 319. So I'm guessing it's within the convention center. So I know where I'm grabbing breakfast that day.
Yep.
Journey booth.
Honestly, it's a lot of fun. Like I said, I've been to the ice cream socials and the breakfast last year. It's lovely to meet fresh new faces. I learn a lot from new faces at SIIM. I really do, in the sense that, they're just so new, so fresh. It's lovely to talk to them, and it's actually grounding, because those of us who have been in the industry for a very long time, there's a lot we take for granted. That when you meet someone new, you're reminded that like this is why we do it, and this is how it could be improved, and so on and so forth. So for sure.
One of the other things is that when you don't know anything about the things, you ask questions about it that once you've learned about it, like, I don't want to say indoctrined, but of course we do it this way. This is how we always do it. Many of those kind of things, you look at it from a fresh perspective because you don't know how things are and what they do. So you ask different. So yeah, I learned, I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't we do it that way? Or yes, we tried that and it doesn't work because of these things, but it's a great thing that you are thinking and so it can spur conversations and learning just in general. I think the big thing about a lot of the SIIM and like this podcast is like the main theme is we like to learn. Clearly.
Oh, don't they say that if you stop learning, you basically stop living?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. I want to shift the conversation for just a moment. I just have to say this. When this was announced, I was very excited. I almost fell off my chair. I'm very, very excited for Tessa's general closing session. And they've not announced a lot of information about it. It's pretty much just the title. I think it's the people you meet in informatics or something along those lines. But for me, that's enough for what I need to know, because obviously Tessa is a great friend, someone I think very highly of. But I've been on the record multiple times saying that one of my absolute favorite things in the informatics domain are the people that you meet. So I could see where this is going, and it's already got me very, very excited. What about you guys? What's caught your attention?
Yeah, for me, like I say, just all the talks regarding the workflow side of things, like definitely going to stop by the toy room with all the tech vendors and stuff and check out those packs and dictation systems and all that stuff. Something that I'm really intrigued about, and I haven't had time to kind of go through the agenda, but something I'm definitely going to look for is, just aside from the workflow stuff, is also kind of the cybersecurity stuff. I'm just kind of curious, like, where things are going. I know that this has been talked about ad nauseum over the past couple of days, but with these new models that Cloud Mythos and all those things that have been hitting the news waves and all the cybersecurity concerns and all of that stuff, I think there's potentially going to be some kind of reckoning of some kind, in the next few years that healthcare systems need to be in front of, obviously, with all of the private data and private health information that we have on our end. So I'm excited to see kind of what folks are talking about in that space, because I'm sure that it's a frenzy of activity at this point.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say, some of the cybersecurity things. And I went to a session, I kind of just popped in random. I was like, all right, let's see what this session's about, a few years back. And it was about the journey that a hospital in Southern Oregon went through after they had a data breach. And all the different things, like they had to go, because now their computer process order entry is down, their EMR is down. So how do you continue functioning? Like, oh, well, we can go back to, like, there's no charge nurse. We have to get people to be charge nurses. We can fax orders. The fax machines are all dusty and they're not used to outputting this amount of information. So they're all breaking down. And we can tube stuff. Thankfully, they still have their like pneumatic tube systems, right? Things like that, right? And then not only that, but like they had to get in touch with like the banks and their creditors to let them know, and they might need to get access to a line of credit. They have to get their insurers to know what's going on, because yes, they need to keep going, and eventually they will bill the insurance, and there will be this huge bolus whenever they get back up and running. So the insurance company needs to know, and they still have to pay their janitor staff, all the other support staff, people still have rent. They still got to put food on their tables. And then listening, I was just like, oh my God. Because, many times we focus in on just like one aspect. Like this was like hearing this whole thing. I'm like, wow, this is wow. So SIIM has done over the past few years some of these, large reviews and like different aspects of it. of cybersecurity attacks and things. So it's been very interesting to kind of learn and see, and I want to see what they're doing this year. I know Jim Whitfield, yeah, it was a good one a couple of years ago. Jim Whitfield it was him and two other people were supposed to be like CEO, COO, and CTO. And then there were two people that would rotate in and out from the crowds. And then people could come up and be like, well, I'm a PAX administrator, blah, 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 this, and different things like that. So that was a great discussion. And, we had some fun with it. It was, who was it? It was, I can see his face. He's from Duke, neuroradiologist, really great guy, program committee chair.
Chris Roth.
Yes, Chris Roth. Thank you. Yeah. So Chris Roth goes up and he pretends to be an interventional radiologist and he's all like being type A and this and that. And I always have my sunglasses with me. So I went up later on and like pretending to be just like a regular radiologist, very chill, like, hey man, what's going on? And like, but I brought up some different points. So it was like a juxtaposition between the type A and the type B, kind of, and Tessa took pictures and she's like, I can't believe you just pulled that one off. It was great. But, and it was a good discussion, even though we had fun with it and kind of hammed it up, because it brought out these different points that people may not have thought about. And it was a great way so it wasn't just like a lecture, right? It was more interactive. And I know SIIM has been doing more of these interactive sessions, which is also great. But yeah, the cybersecurity thing, and it's an area that I know I'm weak on, and I want to learn more and get to be better about some of this stuff, because there's a lot going on in each of these different things.
You remind me of sessions they did a few years in a row. I think it was Stories from the Front Lines, that was called, or something like that. I love these type of sessions, whether the topic is cybersecurity or downtime or other things, but just stories from the real world really capture my imagination very strongly.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Because you can only imagine different things going wrong, and then whatever your own experience is, but hearing from other people like, oh crap, how did you deal with that? Or like, wait, really? That happened on top of everything? Oh my Lord. It gets pretty crazy to hear some of the things. Mohannad, do you know if Alok is going to be making it out?
I have not talked to him about it, to be honest. I'm not sure.
All right.
I hope so. It would be nice to see him.
Yeah. Alok is one of our hosting alums. He moved to the UAE several years back, and he'll tie a visit with his family and friends and whatnot, and then also come out to the annual meeting. So it's been great to see him every so often too. Great guy. I think they had do they have a PAX upgrade or something like that? So that's why he kind of like stepped back a little bit again.
Yeah, I think that was a few years ago.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, it'd be great to see him, back to it's the people.
For sure.
Yeah.
The friends that you see, the friends that you make along the way. And that's part of the reason why initially, before we started recording, we made a joke about SIIMcast being a Hotel California. You can check out, we can never leave. It's a joke. We're not holding anyone against their will.
No, of course not. Yeah. Are Farzana and the kids coming, or are they going to stay home?
Farzana, my wife, shall be. Kids, no. Unfortunately, the timing is not very good with school.
Right.
Yeah.
So one other thing that we should probably touch on is like Mohannad, you were talking about like how you eventually you talked to Arjun and I, and then we're like, why don't you join? So if people are interested in joining the podcast team, definitely, it's not a Hotel California. You can leave if you want to, but if you're interested, yeah, we can always use more help, and if you have ideas for episodes, our brains are only so big and can only think of so many different things, but yeah, we're happy to take advice, opinions, ideas, and run with them. And we've actually tried different formats of the podcast in the past based on some input from other people to, well, why don't you try something like this? Okay, let's see if we can make it work, for better or for worse. It'd be great to get some more, like I said, new blood, new ideas. And, SIIM is always looking for volunteers in general. So, even if you're not interested in helping us out, there are other things that, different committees, different work groups, all sorts of stuff. The SIIM staff is awesome. I can never speak highly enough of them. They're just rock stars. And this is like their Super Bowl Sunday kind of thing.
Yeah, I think as I come to the end of my members in training term, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what other committees are available and trying to get involved on those side of things. that was part of my onus for reaching out to Ali and, him hooking me up with Mohannad and getting me on here was, trying to get more involved in the informatics community. And SIIM is like, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best ways to do that. So like you said, meeting people and making new friends and things like that. I was also going to plug to the baseball fans on here, Pittsburgh PNC Park is supposedly one of the better ballparks in the country. So Dodgers are going to be in town during SIIM. So, if you have time, might buy a ticket. Might be expensive, but should be a heck of a time. I'm probably going to make it out there.
Awesome. Well, this has been really good to chat with both of you guys. Thank you for making the time. It's unfortunate our other hosts couldn't join us today, but hopefully our listeners get something out of this episode. We talked about a number of things, and goes without saying, I'm looking forward to our next season with you guys. Great ideas, great guests. That's really what keeps us going more than anything else.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
SIIMcast has been brought to you by the Society of Imaging Informatics in Medicine. Please visit our website at SIIM.org for more information and educational content, including webinars and an archive of prior episodes. Please follow us on Twitter at SIIM_tweets. Thank you to our listeners for your continued support.